Hello, and welcome to Talking Solutions. This is the ninth podcast from the Association for Solution Focused Hypnotherapy. I'm Sally Hare.
And I'm Trevor Eddles, and we're both experienced solution focused hypnotherapists. Today, we're really pleased to have Sophie Fletcher with us. Welcome, Sophie, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Sophie Fletcher is a hypnotherapist, trainer, coach, and author. She's a particular interest in women's health and well-being, writing for both the national press and also authoring several best-selling titles, including Mindful Hypnobirthing and Mindful Momma. She's recently turned her attention to the later phases of women's health, and her newest book, Mindful Menopause, is available, as are the others, from all the major book retailers.
Okay, let's start with the questions then. Sophie, you've been a hypnotherapist for around 17 years now. What is it that attracted you to hypnotherapy in the first place? And what do you think it offers beyond more conventional talking therapies?
Well, yeah, it is 17 years. I always judge it by the birth of my second child because that's when I discovered hypnosis. I think like a lot of people listening, if they're hypnotherapists, we've all come to it through rather unconventional routes, maybe, where as a therapy, it's completely knocked us sideways in a good way. And, when I discovered it, when I used it, it was for hypnobirthing, which I think how is one of the few areas of hypnosis where it has really kind of entered the mainstream and people are accessing it who haven't before or wouldn't have considered it before, people like me, really. And I was a bit tentative to start with and listened to some CDs before I went to sleep at night. And I slept like a dream. I loved listening to my tracks. And when I went into labor, it was just remarkable. And in my husband, he's got a PhD in biochemistry, so he's one of the skeptics. Um, and he said to me, "You've got to look into this. This is fascinating." And at the time, I was a policy advisor for the government, and just I just went on a course just to find out more about it, just as a bit of curiosity. And what I did train and loved it, and I just switched careers as many of us have done, and worked as a policy advisor for a bit while building up my business, and went straight into hypnobirthing. I knew that's what I wanted to do from the outset, and it just grew from there, really.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm interested in your work around women's health, and in particular, your most recent work around perimenopause and menopause, because there seems to have been a real change in attitude towards this over the last couple of years, with various celebrities choosing not to suffer in silence, if you like. And your latest book subtitle is How to Have a Calm, Positive Menopause, which goes very much against that negative idea of what it is in popular culture at the moment. It's radical. So I'm going to start by being cheeky and ask, do you really think a calm, positive menopause is an achievable goal for most women?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be a hypnotherapist if I said no. I think anything is possible. um, but absolutely. And I think part of the problem is this cultural narrative. And anyone who's trained in any sort of talking therapy, NLP, hypnosis, where we look at those different states of awareness and how we process information around us and how that translates into our actions and our behaviors and our experiences, they know that ultimately you can change your experience, you can change the narrative. And I think a lot of the things out there, like, hot flushes, and we'll talk about this in a bit more detail, maybe. The research done by Gary Elkins says that 73% of women showed an improvement in hot flushes using hypnosis. Yeah, it's not recommended. It's not really recommended. It was recommended by NICE, but not anymore. And as far as I know, but yeah, CBT is. And so we have some of these barriers with hypnosis, I think, but there is definitely, I do honestly believe that we can change our experience of menopause by looking at the narrative that we play internally around it, but also how we tackle certain symptoms using imagery. And so there are two different approaches. There is the belief system that we're kind of upending a little bit with hypnosis. Also the practical imagery tools that change your experience in the moment. So things around sleep, around hot flushes, around weight management, things like that.
So talking about that practical approach, I really like the practical nature of the book. There's plenty of information in there, exercises to do, lots of tools. So, how important do you think it is that women get away from that cultural narrative and are empowered to take control of their perimenopause and menopause?
I think that's a really important question, because I don't think women necessarily know they can do it. And in some ways, it's just circumstance. It's whether they've seen something in a newspaper, whether they've seen something on social media, whether a friend has said to them, it doesn't need to be like this. And that's much the same as it is with hypnobirthing. Most people do hypnobirthing because they know someone else who's had a positive experience using it. And I think the same goes for menopause. To trip you out of that negative belief cycle and that negative narrative, you need to have something in your environment that goes, so you have to be in a place where you're kind of there looking out for it, but you think, yeah, I can do it differently. And it may be that someone gives you a book, or someone, I'm not the only person doing positive work around menopause.
Right.
There's some great role models out there. And so I think it is just a case of circumstance and breaking out of that belief cycle, that negative belief cycle around. And I think to a large degree that's luck.
Yeah. So to have that sort of something positive to go towards rather than something to go against. Yeah. And you say about the other people kind of working in the field. Who else is producing good work at the moment?
There aren't many hypnotherapists working in the field who are specializing in this. I mean, I've started doing training this year.
Right.
And I've trained about 20 so far this year who are going to be looking at specific areas around menopause that we can do work on. But when I say there are positive role models, Gary Elkins in the States is doing most work around this. So if you're interested in the research and the evidence and the work that he's doing, that's a really good place to start. But I think there are role models like Gillian Anderson. So there are people in the press who are having very positive experiences. I haven't mentioned Davina McCall simply because I think her stance is very pro HRT. And
yes, it is, yeah.
And so, and I'm in the middle. I think the two can sit together. So you can take HRT without any other therapies around it. You can take complementary therapies and supplements, exercising without any HRT, but the two can meet in the middle as well. And I think a lot of doctors will say HRT isn't a magic pill. You have to be doing the other stuff around nutrition, diet, exercise, sleep. The mind stuff. You need to be working on your well-being. And I think there needs to be a space where people come together and talk about all of it and how it works together. It's right for that individual.
Yeah, it's really helpful, hearing about that training. I know Trevor's going to ask you about what you've got in the pipeline in a minute, but I'm going to ask you that if someone's listening who is going through menopause at the moment, not feeling so calm, confident about it, we've got good resources that you've mentioned, but what will be your kind of practical first aid, advice to them right now, while they're waiting for your book to arrive, perhaps?
Just start listening to a simple letting go track at night or something. I use Insight Timer and Calm and things like that. Insight Timer is free. And I just think doing one thing a day that allows you to empty that stress bucket, as it were, just to wind down, really, really helps, because I think these times in women's lives where we go through these really intense hormonal changes, these times of flux, the brain is kind of reorganizing itself for the next chapter. It's getting rid of what it doesn't need. It's kind of putting roots down for things that it will need. It's maintaining things that it's taking forward. And if you think about it as a house reorganization or reorganizing the filing system in your brain, you need to kind of have some downtime to allow it to do that, because it's quite tiring. It's like learning a new job. So it's really important to create the space to allow that to happen. So listening to something every night, just on a free app or something, or the tracks from my book are free to download from the Penguin website. That's where I would start every day, just doing something. It's it doesn't take much effort, and you'll just go to sleep afterwards anyway, probably. So.
I like that analogy of like that filing thing, that sometimes when you're resorting your filing, you do have to get all your bits out first, haven't you, before it starts easing. that's
And it
really
does get
helpful.
easier, and it does get easier. So
Yeah, thank you.
You know, that's interesting because what you're saying is that a bit like the placebo effect, women have got to change their expectations, and if the narrative they're reading in the press is that they will expect it to be a horrible experience, a bit like childbirth is always shown on TV with lots of screaming and shouts of never again. Same with the menopause; it's sort of expectations that it can be okay. And you're supplying lots
yeah.
of ways of doing it.
I mean,
That's
where focus goes, energy flows, eh? It's
yeah.
that old, and if you're thinking, oh my gosh, is that a hot flush? And and the more stressed you get about it, the more likely you are to have them because they're vasomotor symptoms. They're triggered by higher more cortisol in your system. And so if you're adding stress to that and anxiety to that because of the expectation symptoms, they can get worse. And
Yeah,
so with
vicious
hypnosis,
cycle.
we're breaking that cycle, we're
Mm,
changing the narrative, and we're saying, hey, there are things you can proactively do to change your experience as well. And I don't think people think about that. So we do birth planning. So now, which
mm,
people really didn't do 10 years ago, you didn't plan your birth
mm,
that much. But now nearly everyone does it. Have you got your birth plan? Is one of the first things you ask people.
mm,
And I think we should be doing that around menopause. We should be thinking about what sort of how we want to enter this next chapter in our lives. And it might not be about whether you want to go on medication or not. It might be about things that I've always wanted to do. It might be a plan about the things that you're looking forward to at this stage in your life. So there are lots and lots of things you can do to just restructure that
yeah.
that narrative.
I love that idea of taking control of that because menopause. Oh, so when's it going to happen? How bad is it going to be? So to actually turn it around, well, what do I want out of it, and what do I want at this stage of my life? That is really radical, isn't it?
And it's like it's I mean, I've got on my desk now, you can't see it, but I have a vision board, and I did this last May. And I kind of like, you like being creative, and I think when you go through menopause you do become more creative. It's a bit like when you're pregnant, if you've been pregnant before and you've had those vivid dreams and everything, a similar sort of thing starts to happen in menopause. So you can get more vivid dreams, and some people say that they have visions and things like that. The brain can get quite active, which is also why hypnosis is so powerful, because you're working with symbolism and metaphor. But so I have a little vision board, and when I look at this, I have within 18 months pretty much completed everything on that vision board. So I'm going on a 90-kilometer walk in September,
Wow.
uh, solo walk, and that's part of my board.
Mm,
And so it's all these things which I am looking forward to, as opposed to worrying about. And that's not to say that I don't have days where I just want to, but I know that those days will pass, and I know that's part of this journey. And that, yeah, some days it is hard, but hypnosis gives you the tools to manage that.
yeah, using those visualizations to really focus on something else rather than the things to worry about. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like vision boards. I often recommend those to clients to actually set one up just so they can see over time the same thing. That's what they want to do. So it's
And I think
useful.
they're underrated. People kind of go, "Oh, well, it's so out there, so this and that." But actually, I think a well-structured vision board, proper affirmations, values-based affirmations that are written with your client and are personalized, are really, really powerful, because
Mm.
they break that negative narrative.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. Can I ask, what do you think a hypnotherapist should be doing to help clients with menopause and perimenopause issues?
So, from a therapy perspective, I think hypnosis is really interesting. So, you come from a solution focused background,
mm,
so it's very structured. And I think with menopause, you have to be a little bit more flexible, because the approach is slightly different. If someone comes in to see you for weight loss, for example, I would start with sleep. I'd be asking how they're sleeping, what their patterns, because if you're not sleeping properly, which is often the case in menopause, that leads to weight gain as well. And we naturally put on a bit more as our metabolism slows down, but that's not to say people can't lose weight. it's also about shifts in nutrition. So we lose muscle mass in menopause. So and doing a lot of cardio to try and lose the weight actually increases cortisol, which can increase weight gain around the belly, things like that. So it's thinking about the types of exercise you do that are supported through menopause. And so often it's more about thinking about getting the client to research what is right for them. So empowering them to do that research during menopause, and for them to come back to you and say, well, I need to be doing more weight training, but this is how I feel about it.
Right.
I don't feel like I'm exercising properly if I don't sweat.
Mm.
And then you have to tackle the patterns of thinking around the type of exercise they're doing. So you're changing quite deeply rooted narratives around exercise in that individual. So you have to be a little bit more creative around how you work with people. It's a much more holistic approach, I think, and it's really interesting in that way because it's it's really empowering that client as well to go out and learn about menopause and learn about what their options are, deciding what's best for them, rather than just coming in and me doing X, Y, and Z. So it is interesting. And I think for a therapist, it's a good area to go into. I'm a strong believer that specializing in something is a really great way to build a business. It's how I built mine, and becoming the best at what I did in my area of hypnosis. I'm not saying I'm the best, but you know what I mean. And I think menopause, there's so much you can do with menopause. So you can really niche down into it. So I had someone on one of my training courses, and she's a trained nutritionist and a hypnotherapist. And I said, God, you could do some incredible stuff around menopause with nutrition and weight and habits and behaviors with the, you could create a really dynamic package around that. And then I had somebody else she was a hypnotherapist, but she also worked as a specialist nurse in a sexual health clinic.
Right.
She had a lot of understanding around, and she said, oh, I could do this and do, and I said, yeah, you could. So you can really, she could specialize in areas around that, about sexual health and well-being in menopause. Then, you could do a whole thing on menopause planning. It's really, it's a really interesting area to go into. And I think, and it just encourages therapists to step out of the box a bit more and work on a more individual basis with their clients. But I think a lot of people are having menopause, women in their early 40s coming in saying, oh, I'm really struggling to lose weight. People doing traditional sort of straightforward weight management work with them, not understanding that actually the fact they're not sleeping and they're producing ghrelin and they're snacking because of that is having an impact on this. And then all sorts of other practices that support the hypnosis work you're doing. So in the book, I talk about, it's really evidence-based. There's lots of studies in the back, things like gratitude practices, journaling, things that actually make a difference to your day-to-day well-being. So I hate the word sort of self-care. It's more kind of keep steadying. They're like steady tools. They keep you grounded. And I think that really helps manage things as well. So in this, I always teach my clients self-hypnosis too. So they have that empowerment, which I think is really vital at these stages of change in a woman's life, and completely neglected, because usually we cower to kind of the patriarchy, and we were locked up during menopause a lot for being outspoken and loud just 70 years ago. And my grandmother was, a couple of women I've spoken to, their grandmothers were locked away for being mad, when actually they were just speaking their minds.
Yes, the woman in the attic.
We still have that in us because with epigenetics, how much of that are we carrying in ourselves? So yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. But I think there is a lot, people don't see it because it's like a goldfish in the bowl, isn't it? You don't.
Yes. I mean, I think the solution focused approach can really help, because we have people coming for us for specific things where there's specific protocol, but we always run an initial consultation where we have a very holistic look at what's showing up for people, not just what they're presenting with, what they come to us with, but where we kind of delve into, and how's that showing up for you? And then, it's a very holistic approach to empowering people in general. So if what comes out, we can work with. So I think it can be quite a helpful
and that's, I think it's why it's interesting with the solution focused approach, because it can, I think, can be really satisfying, I think, to work
Yeah, and
with.
again, focusing on that future we want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. The first thing I do is like set a goal with my clients and ask them where they want to be. And you know, very often they say, well, I don't want to be this and I don't want to be that.
Yes, yeah, it can be because,
Well,
you know, what are your best hopes? You know, we start, what are your best hopes about? And it's, well, I don't want, and I don't want.
Yeah.
You know, what do you, you know, what do you really want? You know, let's get all that out the way. You know,
And
why
as
not go for what
menopause,
you want?
get them from I don't want
Yeah.
place of I do want, because they don't know they don't know what's possible.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's magical, isn't it? Magical with working with people as well as therapists and seeing that realize itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's go on to the last question from me then. What projects are you working on at the moment? Any exciting developments coming up?
Well, I said to you, I've had a bit of a hiatus because I've got 2 children about to go to uni. So I'm putting stuff online, actually. I'm doing an online course on menopause. And I'm really focusing a lot on hypnobirthing as well, because I think there's a lot of people doing hypnosis work out there who aren't hypnotherapists, who are calling it breathing, relaxation, that type of thing, or mindfulness when it's actually hypnosis. And so I'm on a bit of a campaign to really tighten up my courses so they're very hypnosis based. And there's more drive to educating people about what hypnosis is and what it isn't. And training, I've been doing a lot of training, but very specialized training. I don't have a hypnotherapy course or anything. I do very specialized niche training.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. So if any of this has been of interest to you, you know, we'll be including links to Sophie's website in the podcast intro so you can do your own research on what's going on. And if you feel you need any support working through the challenges of menopause or any of the other topics covered in this series and much more besides, of course, then do visit our website, www.afsfh.com, where you'll find articles, information and resources. Plus, of course, our solution-focused hypnotherapist directory, where you'll be able to look through the profiles of our fully qualified members and choose just the right therapist for you, whether that's local to you or online.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sophie. Thanks for being with us today. And that's about it for our podcast. So it's goodbye from our guest, Sophie Fletcher.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you. And for me, Sally Hare.
And it's goodbye from me, Trevor Edels. So goodbye.
Bye.